You could tell instantly from this frame that the animators locked in. The way conquest fights look so much better than the rest of the show has to be studied. My theory is it's a freelancer named Joaquim dos Santos, who, if you scroll through his Instagram, shows that he worked on the last Mark vs. Conquest fight with the famous wavy hair. I've seen some people say it's Haeyoung Chung, who is responsible for the Omni-Man vs. Guardians fight back in Season 1. Either way, it's clear that there was a shift starting from here, and likely this fight was done by a freelancer. This is great news! Freelancers often get more time and have more expertise in specific scenes, and they can really focus in on the scene that they're assigned to in comparison to the other animators who have to work on the other cuts. I genuinely hope that we get to see more of this kind of work later. This scene in particular is something that I'm not even sure I could show on YouTube, but wow! This is one of the first times the show has made me feel visceral emotions on the same level as the comic. One of my friends had to look away, that's how disgusted he was. I knew what was coming and I still felt that chill run down my spine. Oh my goodness, that was sick. And this fight wasn't even the only thing to talk about. Let's take it back to the beginning of the episode with that Omni-Man and Debbie scene. Well, technically we start off with Mark and Omni-Man talking together, but frankly we don't really care about that. The Debbie stuff is where it gets good. In an earlier video, I said that Steven Yeun and J.K. Simmons were the only good VAs on the cast. I'd like to amend my statement. While no one is watching specifically for Yeun, Oh, or Hamill, they're all excellent VAs here. Sandra Oh has a great performance, only mildly hampered by the animation. I wish the animation had captured even a little bit of the emotion that Sandra was putting in through the booth. There's been crazy stories from VAs, like how Yuji's VA from Jujutsu Kaisen literally laid down on a floor and cried during one of his scenes, and it shows that voice acting is really acting. It's just a shame that this is what the scene looked like, and if you want to know what it could have been, Twitter user Cesebomba, I think, did a great reanimation. This scene played out very differently in the comics. In it, Omni-Man is forgiven pretty much instantly. Of course, also in the comics, his heel turn came very early, and it also wasn't nearly as bad. He just roughed up Mark rather than going out of his way to destroy an entire city. So it made sense here that Debbie, who's now an actual character, and Omni-Man, who is way more evil than in the comics, can't reconcile. And this brings a rather gloomy air to everything surrounding him. He's used to people realizing the depth of his change by him simply apologizing, but the kind and heroic Omni-Man is all Earth has ever known, so of course, they won't be nearly as forgiving. We also know that Debbie will eventually forgive him since we get another flashback of them later in the episode, but it'll have to be more earned. This is the most radical shift that the show has from the comics. It's one that's been in place since Season 1. Even though the main plot of the show seems to be chugging off at around the same pace, this is still something fresh and exciting that I'm here for.
There's still something you need to address!
And of course, now that she's actually in the episode, we have to talk about it. Y'all were out there calling people crazy when they theorized in Season 3 that Tech Jacket was a woman. Y'all were out there saying that the source was unreliable when it was brought up Episode 1. Now we have it. Tech Jacket is Zoe Thompson, not Zach Thompson. We start her off by fighting what I believe is one of the members of the Union, the Walking Dread, a reference to Kirkman's other comic. This intro is really stretched out and another example of something that I pointed out when I said that when Invincible needs filler, it adds a random fight. This did not need to be that long, and frankly, the fact that she was sort of struggling with an Earth criminal does not inspire confidence that she will be of much use to the Viltrumites later. To me, it's extremely odd that Tech Jacket gets changed into a woman and then immediately starts losing fights that he won in the comics. As we can see here, he was putting in work against the Viltrumites, but in the show, she just gets wrecked by them. I was sort of hoping that we would have more Earth heroes or villains or whatnot on the squad, but I guess they didn't want to change it too much from the comics. And after that, we finally get our first on-screen Korean meal. When I watched this episode, I was so happy. It was very close to what I had for dinner last night. Korean food, American drinks, and a Western dessert. Amazing. No notes. During this season, Mark has felt noticeably more Korean than he used to. First, we had the shower scene, then he refused to bow to Satan, which shows some level of Christianity, and now he's eating rice. None of these aspects are stereotypical, and yet they make him feel more Korean nonetheless. I had one guy tell me in my comics that I was projecting my own whiteness onto Debbie, and as a PSA, I am not white. Please do not mistake me for a white person. Thank you. Back to space, and we have a bunch of mostly boring scenes up until the ship gets intercepted by Conquest, Lucan, and a third Viltrumite who looks kinda homeless. Since the actual fight isn't much, let's just go back to the Mark versus Conquest fight. I am of the opinion that Mark should have spent time learning BJJ or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instead of bench pressing magnets. If he did, he could have easily defeated Conquest. I'm not talking medium difficulty, I am talking low difficulty. Let's go over it. Striking martial arts are generally considered unviable for flying superhumans like Viltrumites, who are flying and don't rely on footwork, balance, or gravity. BJJ, however, does not rely on these. It is a grappling martial art that works by you applying your own pressure onto an opponent and using your force to leverage parts of their body to break. If Mark had done a rear naked choke instead of a front choke, Conquest would have had zero options. If he flies, Mark is still choking him using his own strength. The pressure is coming from his muscles and Conquest himself. If he tried breaking Mark's arms, he can't. He tried in this fight and couldn't do it, even with a better position. Spinning around or slamming Mark into the ground would both cause way less damage than the Viltrumite knife hand that he hit Mark with, and without sufficient room between them, that isn't an option. Conquest is big, but he isn't shown to be flexible. Mark would have sunk the choke in, held it for 5 minutes, and Conquest would be out, finished, kaput. Mark would have some bruises or a concussion maybe, but he wouldn't nearly have been as injured. That is my rant as a guy who did BJJ for a couple of years and achieved a blue belt. It's not much, but it's enough to understand that you could totally apply it to flying people that can generate their own leverage. If you try inverting gravity by flying, the other guy can fight back by flying downwards, and even if you float upwards, you still have access to chokes like the triangle choke, which can be performed from the bottom position. I might go into this in a full-length video maybe, but Invincible doesn't respect fighting, and by fighting I do not mean power scaling. I said before that Invincible chooses to fluff its videos out with fight scenes. The reason I say fluff out is because a lot of these fights are not really informative of the characters. There's a secret to communicating things about a character through their fighting, and with the exception of the Mark vs. Conquest fight, Invincible doesn't really care for it. The choreography is mostly just muscular action figures clashing together, again with the exception of Mark's choke. Not only that, but Conquest loses to Mark, but Mark was also losing to these flaxen robots, so how would Conquest do against those? We're led to believe that something like 5 or 6 of them could outperform him. The Reanimen as well seem to be stronger than their human counterparts, so the ones made from the alternate Mark's body should be even more powerful. Why aren't they bringing those to fight the Viltrumites? Why not bring the regular ones? Since the soldiers the Viltrumites brought along were enough to shift the tides from the main characters winning to the Viltrumites winning, then how strong are they meant to be? I'm not saying that they need to keep a detailed chart that shows off the level of power of every character, but when this entire season rests on the premise that the Viltrumites are an unstoppable force, having Mark be brutalized by literal fodders before taking out the second strongest Viltrumite in a 1v1 is not a good look. Fights don't need to be filler, but Invincible treats it like it is, and I'm sure a lot of people will say stuff like, well, it makes the story less boring, or wouldn't it be bad if Mark just one-shot all of his opponents? Firstly, go watch the Ip Man movies. He's already solved the Superman problem. Systemic issues, more powerful opponents, hostages, and just being flashy with it are all solutions to an overpowered main protagonist. Mark trying to fight systemic issues would honestly probably be better for the budget than just adding more filler fights, cause it'll be talking scenes anyways. We finish off the episode with Omni-Man and Oliver about to board for the next episode, and Alan and Tech Jacket squirreled away in the Viltrumite ship. I'm as clueless as anyone as to what'll happen with those two, since I forgot that portion of the comic. In the meantime, subscribe if you want to see me cover the Viltrumite War, and thank you for watching.